When people outside care, we know that people are supporting us, and that's what's keeping us going.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and you're going to find out why Missy took a stroll to the post office. Then later on in the pod, we sat down with Sasha Samuels, who is an artist and activist who I met just outside of Lviv, Ukraine. It's a great pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm so hot.
It is August.
I'm-
It is the dog days.
Right. Okay, but however, this summer has played a bit of a cruel trick on us.
Oh, is it?
I feel like.
Okay.
Yes, because it hasn't been as hot, right? I mean,
it has been below a little bit below normal.
right. And
Mhm.
last week, our area of the world here in Oklahoma actually had a little bit of a cool down.
Yeah, it's kind of like a false fall, wasn't it?
And it got many of us thinking we could actually go outside and
I mean,
do things.
When you go out in the morning and it's like, oh wow, you put your arms, you
Yeah.
cross your, oh, that's kind of chilly.
We
Okay.
had a few days of that. And
Yeah.
so, yes, so we've been thinking, okay, we can get outside a little bit more. Anyways, false alarm it was. because
it was.
Today I needed to run to the post office, and we've moved close to our little downtown area primarily because you and I love to walk places.
Right.
It was, I don't know, like 2:00 in the afternoon. And you know how this is when we work from home.
Right.
Sometimes your step count during the day is like from your bed to the desk, right?
Yes,
There's
yes,
there's
yeah.
not a lot of
Yeah, if you get a couple of hundred steps in, you did well.
Exactly. And so we're on I am a little bit of a, several days stretch where we're just at home.
Right.
And so, yeah, my movement has been a little less than. So
Yes.
today when I needed to go to the post office, I was like, you know what? It's not been quite as hot as normal. I shall walk.
How'd that work out for you?
Oh my gosh. I got one block down the road and thought, I'm not going to make it. I was having trouble breathing. And then I thought, this is stupid. It is like, I've got to power through and get to the post. I needed to move my body, and I did not want to be that much a wimp.
Getting this mental picture of you, because I mean, I love you dearly, but you do not perspire.
Oh, no. I sweat. I sweat like in the very worst way. And I don't like it. I am very cranky when I am warm. You know this all too well.
But the dogs didn't bark at you on the street, did they?
They ran. So anyways, I was determined. I felt a little lightheaded. I had to walk through a park where, again, it's hot. There's not a lot of kids out playing necessarily.
I know
but
the stretch of park you're talking about too.
But there are a lot of are unhoused in our community will hang out there in the
Sure.
pavilions during the day. I
Yeah.
mean, again, trying to get some relief from the heat. And I'm imagining this. I'm like, I'm gonna pass out and then be at the mercy of strangers to
Yeah.
come and like figure out how to call you and tell you. Anyways,
Yeah.
all this is going through my head. It was so hot. So get to the post office, mail my piece of mail, and then I'm walking back through that park, and I remember on my left, like, there's a splash pad.
For little ones.
Okay. Or also middle-aged women who are really hot and sweaty.
Oh my gosh.
So there weren't any small children actively playing out there.
Right,
There
yeah.
was a family or a big group like in the picnic area of the splash pad who were, a birthday party or something. And so I had a decision to make. I'm like,
please, if there's a God in heaven, you made the right decision.
so I'm thinking, what is my risk here? Because this splash pad is right near the police station in the city offices.
It is.
So I thought, okay, how much of a creeper am I going to appear to be if I by myself walk into the splash pad for some relief.
Oh my gosh.
And do I care if I'm on a list of like banned people from the splash pad? Actually, no. So yes, I did.
You
I
did.
did.
Oh my
I did.
gosh.
I went into the splash pad.
So did you like run through like a little kid, or did you? I mean, what
I
approach did you use? What methodology
I
did you use
walked to
going
the
through?
edge of where the water was hitting, and I took off my shoes, and then I went
Yes.
to the like the first little sprinklery thing,
Yeah.
and just stood over it and like got my legs wet and my feet wet, and then just kind of like went on my merry way.
No cops showed up. No parents or dad
No,
or took a
no.
photo. People weren't taking a picture of
The
you.
people at the party, I mean, if they reported me, if anybody looks at some security footage, that would be like, okay, this is weird. But anyways, no. So I did it and I made it home. I'm
Oh my
still
goodness.
very hot and sweaty, but I got my steps in today.
Okay, so I got a follow up question here. What was so important that you had to go to the post office today?
Uh, wow. I'm so glad you asked.
Okay.
I had to mail a copy of our magazine to someone who had
Yes.
signed up to become an
An
advocate.
advocate.
So if
Yes.
you'll allow me a moment to
Yes,
make a
please. The
shameless
floor.
plug.
The floor is yours.
Yes. So yes, for those of you who are not aware or may not be an advocate, you should go online and sign up to be an advocate, and I will walk again to the post office to mail you a copy of our most recent copy of the magazine, no matter what the
No matter
temperature.
what the temperature
Right.
is. Yeah.
So, I mean, this issue in particular is amazing because it features 25 people who inspire,
Yes.
and it's just an issue full of inspirational stories of people who are out there being change makers. Some you may have heard of, some you'll never hear of.
Yeah.
But in this day and age where I tell you all the time, I feel like the world is on fire and I'm here with my little squirt gun. I think these are all just people who have their little squirt guns and they're doing their damnedest
They are.
to make a difference and to put out some fires. So
Yeah.
it's a really great issue. So like I said, if you're interested in sending me on a really miserable trek to the post office,
There you go.
go goodfaithmedia.org,
Yeah.
sign up. I will do it for
Now,
you.
do you promise to come back to the splash
Splash
pad?
pad?
when
I
you
mean,
go? Because if you do, I'm going to need a photo of
yes,
that.
yes, I probably do. So, anyways, that's
Well,
why I am
that's a good
sitting
reason.
here smelly in your office
That is
recording
a
right
great
now. But
reason.
so speaking of people who inspire, we have a
Yes.
really great guest today, Sasha
Indeed.
Samuels,
Yes.
who happens to be an artist that you met
In Ukraine.
of all
Yeah.
places. And so we wanted to kind of bring her on just to tell a story again of somebody who's just making a difference in their little corner and area and their expertise. And before we do that, I want to just kind of back up and give a little context for how you met and
Yeah.
where you met, because I think the episode where we talked about your time in Ukraine, we didn't really go into great detail about the Superhuman Center. And I wanted
Right.
to give you an opportunity to share a little bit more about that because it's just a really incredible facility.
Yeah, I mean, when I was over in Lviv, Ukraine, meeting some remarkable people, everybody kept telling me, you got to go to the Superhuman Center. You got to go to the Superhuman Center. So it's just right outside the city, and it's this incredible hospital. In fact, it unfortunately is becoming the world's leading experts on prosthetic care. And so the Superhuman Center has been around since the beginning of the invasion, and then, of course, has really increased dramatically under the full invasion 3 years ago. And so this is where wounded soldiers are sent that have lost limbs. And so they receive reconstructive surgery and then fitted for prosthetics and then rehabilitated. Many of them, Missy, are going back to the front lines. I mean, it's just really incredible because they want to fight for their country and for democracy. And then also there are some workers there who are on the front lines, first responders. And in fact, I met one of them and interviewed them. He was a Brit, and he was there volunteering, just helping soldiers as they were injured on the front line. And his vehicle was targeted by the Russians, and an RPG struck it. And when it did, Eddie told me that he lost his arm, and then when it exploded, he lost his leg. And so he was telling me, my parents, my family were wanting me to go back to the UK to get medical treatment. But he said, when you're wounded with your soldiers, this is your family.
That's
And he
amazing.
wanted to stay in Ukraine. And so they brought him to the Superhuman Center. And he was being Eddie too. I mean, he's the cook, I guess, there for a lot of the volunteers at the Superhuman Center. And he was cooking as we interviewed. In fact, you can see the full interview on our YouTube channel.
That's amazing. And I know you told me stories, other stories of people who were there injured, again,
Yeah.
getting rehabilitated, who weren't from Ukraine, who were volunteers who came from, like you said,
Hmm.
this one person from the UK.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind.
Right.
I understand to a point. I mean, let's be honest, being willing to go to the front line for your
Mhm.
country. I mean, I would be terrified, but maybe I would do that. But to see suffering in another country
Right.
and to say, I need to go and help. And we actually know of several people in that camp, and it's amazing to
Yeah.
me. And
They're
it's
remarkable people.
inspiring to me to know that humans are that caring and that compassionate, and just that dedicated
Yeah.
to defending someone else.
It really is. And, as I was traveling or as I was touring the Superhuman Center, everywhere we went, there were Ukrainians there, Ukrainian engineers, physicians, but there are also a lot of Europeans and some Americans, there that were volunteering, that were working for the cause. And it was really, really remarkable. Of course, and that's where I'm at our guest today, as part of the rehabilitation is to show the beauty of these soldiers and that they are while they may look a little bit different, they're still the same person and they still have the same resolve and so our guest today is a painter. And so I walked into her room and she was doing portraits or a portrait of this one soldier, and I was just so inspired by her. It's just really, really remarkable.
Yeah, so in learning more about Sasha, I just wanted to share because we did have a conversation offline after our interview that was equally as inspiring to me
Mhm.
as what we are as our interview.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just share something. She works in a space, and we kind of talk about this in the beginning, where trauma and
Hmm.
psychology and art sort of
Right.
intersect. And she just mentioned that when you walk into a room, people will co-regulate,
Hmm.
and how, if you walk into a room with someone who's really anxious, that, you may become anxious. And so she
Right.
was talking about that in her approach to painting these soldiers and having to really center herself
Hmm.
to make sure that, what she was giving them was calm and reassuring.
Yeah.
And the way she explained it was so beautiful. And, she talked about the first soldiers that she went in to paint. And she said, I centered myself, but still teared up when I
Mm.
saw him.
Yeah.
And she said, I had to tell him, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because I'm in awe of you.
That was yeah.
And I
That was a
feel like that's what you have described about these soldiers, is just being in awe of them and their resolve and their determination. And so I love the work that she's doing. I love the reminder that art does help us process,
mm,
and it can be a very healing medium, both to create and to receive. And, looking at her website and these portraits of the soldiers, I just can't describe how beautiful they are and how much of a story they tell.
yeah.
And so, like I said earlier, as we look at the world and all of the things going on and feel like we can't do anything, this is such a great example of someone who says, this is where my gifts and talents are. How can I use them and how can I make a difference?
Yeah.
And she talks about finding your passion. If each one of us found something we're passionate about and decided to dedicate to that in whatever way that we can, the world would change.
Right. Yeah, I mean, she's just such an inspiration. And I'm so glad that we got to connect there at the Superhuman Center in Lviv as then afterwards. And we've had these conversations. So,
So I hope our listeners enjoy hearing more of her story and the work that she's doing in Ukraine. It is just super inspiring and exciting to share with everyone.
yep. And we'll be right back.
As a former college baseball player, I know firsthand the challenges athletes face. That's why we're proud to support Christian Athlete Circles, a ministry that is creating spaces and resources to accompany athletes on their faith journey, wherever they are. To learn more about Christian Athlete Circles, go to ChristianAthleteCircles.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Sasha Samuels is an artist and designer. Samuels creates in extremely diverse cultures, both in Silicon Valley and Italy. She resides part-time in the Bay Area expressively to cross-pollinate with pioneering scientists in the fields of psychology and trauma recovery, as well as art scholars. Receiving her BFA from Rhode Island School of Design, she spent her senior year abroad as a member of its European Honors Program in Rome. She led a lifelong multidisciplinary exploration, some with Italian masters in painting, a Florentine stone mosaic, goldsmithing, ceramics, sculpture, blacksmithing, and enamels. In June, Sasha and I met outside Lviv, Ukraine at the Superhuman Center, where I was working on a story and she was painting portraits of wounded soldiers. Sasha, we've been looking forward to this time together. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Sasha, I know Mitch is really excited to kind of dig in and talk specifically about your work in Ukraine. But before we do that, I kind of want to get some background from you and just learn more about you and your just journey as an artist and kind of how you ended up, being able to do this work. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I come from a family of artists. I've been making art ever since I could hold Play-Doh in my hands. And, I can't underestimate if you have kids who have a artistic leaning, just give them materials to play with. Playing with Play-Doh seems like such an innocent thing, but really I was finding my fine motor skills, honing those. I was learning about color mixing and creating shapes. And it just sort of took off from there. I was drawing as a teenager, and I used to ride horses. And one of the stables that I rode at was purchased by Paul Newman and Joanne
Oh,
Woodward.
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Yeah, so my father, being sort of streetwise, ambitious guy, he found out which horse was Joanne Woodward's and arranged a photo shoot of the horse. And I did a drawing of this horse when I was about 17. It was hung in her apartment at the stable. And when Joanne Woodward came to visit, she opened the door to her apartment and saw this drawing and said, "Oh my goodness, that's Cheerful, my horse." And she wound up purchasing it. So that was my first really real jewelry sale at the age of 17, or
Wow.
excuse me,
Wow.
art sale.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned jewelry. So
That's amazing.
what different mediums do you work in? Because I've heard you mention drawing and painting and now jewelry.
Yeah, so I make my living primarily as a designer goldsmith. That was
Oh,
my
wow.
major at Rhode Island School of Design. And so I'm a craftsperson, but I've also always done fine arts, really starting with these very hyper-realistic pencil drawings as a young person, and then eventually transitioning over to painting. And again, with paints in particular, there is a lot of craft that goes into it,
Right.
particularly with oil paints.
So I'm so fascinated by just the process of art and the imagination and creativity of artists in general. So, when you get started on a project, does an idea come to you, or do you just begin to work in those mediums and then inspiration hits? How does the process of creating art play out for you?
Yeah, so really it depends upon the day.
Yeah.
Some days the inspiration really hits and I move to create a piece. Sometimes I have an order from a client and I simply have to just lean into the design process. When it comes to, something like painting the soldiers in Ukraine, that was just pure humanity driven inspiration. That was a real need that needed to be filled, and I felt like I could help with that need.
So I want to ask, since you touched on it already, about the part of your bio that Mitch read when you uh, work with scientists in the fields of psychology and trauma. I'm fascinated to hear more about this. So tell me about the intersection of those fields and how that plays out for you.
Okay, so digging into personal history, I have a couple of, I would say, toxic individuals in my family. One I would call a full-on sociopath.
Hmm.
The other one, definitely a malignant narcissist. So I
Hmm.
had to become, for survival purposes, I had to become fluent in the language of narcissism and psychology, trauma recovery.
Mm.
And so some of what has driven me to go to Ukraine to help the soldiers is an experiential sharing that we have of surviving psychological trauma and the knowledge that we can heal from that if we have the right modalities and we're patient and we're persistent. So for me, it became a necessity.
Wow. So, kind of continuing on that line of thought, Sasha. I mean, art has always been this expression of beauty, but it's also been a commentary or filter for people interpreting what's going on in the world. And historically, we see art as uh, a mechanism to tell us what's going on in that period of time, demonstrating to generations uh, afterwards, giving us a glimpse into what's happening. So, in your art, because I know you did a piece back in the pandemic, there have been times where you've used art as an opportunity to express your own feelings, your own narratives within these very trying times, so to speak. So, do you see art as this continuation of an expression and commentary on what's going on in the world today?
It absolutely is, because as long as we're alive in this world, we're having reactions to what's going on in the world.
Mhm.
And sometimes we artists produce a piece as a kind of art therapy for ourselves, as a way to process what's going on. Because when we create art, we're doing so from a non-verbal, at least visual arts, usually it's from a non-verbal space.
Mm.
So we're working with, the visual language, and that can access parts of the brain that need healing that talk therapy may not.
Love that.
So now let's get into kind of how you ended up painting wounded soldiers in Ukraine. I mean, that's just, I can't imagine, did this idea just come to you one day, or were you
Yeah. So how
approached?
do
Like,
you and I
how?
end up in an elevator
Yeah,
in
so
Lviv, Ukraine
let's
together? That's what I want to know.
Right?
let's
To
tell
have the
your
privilege of being
story
there.
leading up to the, yes, you're running into my husband.
No, no worries. So, great question, of course. So when the full-scale invasion occurred, like so many people across the world, I was just devastated, heartbroken. How unnecessary is this? What a waste of energy and resource. How psychopathic is this behavior? And I started donating money to World Central Kitchen,
Mhm.
because I thought, well, that's a good nonviolent thing that I can do. It will support people in a time of need. And I was doing so. I was holding private exhibitions of my work and donating a percentage of the proceeds to World Central Kitchen. And, I'm thinking I'm a drop in the bucket, but every drop, helps fill the
Hmm.
bucket. And I'll
Right.
just be my little drop in the bucket, and I'll help out in this little way that I can. And then World Central Kitchen wanted to do a Zoom with me. And I thought, wow, I guess I'm a bigger drop than I thought.
Right.
So, meanwhile, I was at the Getty Center in Los Angeles. My partner was doing some research down there, and I met an artist, a portrait artist, who told me that she had done a painting for Ukraine. It was a portrait of a woman who, it came from one of the first photographs that came out of Ukraine, of an injured civilian from, I believe, Mariupol. And she did this beautiful portrait of this woman. It was huge. It was not a comfortable portrait to look at, because the woman had been wounded. She had a bandage on her head and there was some blood on her face. And she contacted some of her friends in LA and said, surely one of you must know a celebrity. I just want to auction off this painting. I want all the money to go to an NGO in Ukraine. She wound up selling it for $100,000.
Oh
Wow.
my goodness.
And that reminded me of the power of art, the money that circulates in the fine art field, and people wanting to do good who will go into their deep pockets and support such a cause. So I thought about, what could I do that might be along those lines, but in my own way? I didn't want to simply copy her.
Hmm.
And this is the part that, for me, when I tell this story, I can't tell it without feeling emotional.
Sure.
I was following a brigade that had been covered, I believe, in the Washington Post, who had lost a sapper, a deminer, during an interview in in Ukraine at the front. He was a volunteer from England who was helping out, and I later just looked up that brigade. I just Googled searched on that brigade. How's that brigade doing? And they had a website, and they were raising money for various things. And there was one person they interviewed briefly in particular who was, he was a software developer in his normal life. He was a civilian, and now he was raising money for a sniper rifle,
Mm.
because he volunteered to go to the front. And suddenly this man who was just happily writing code on a computer was raising money for a sniper rifle. And that being, living part-time in Silicon Valley, that just struck a chord that was too close to home. We all know people that write code.
Mm-hmm.
Can we imagine there being a home invasion, that man suddenly turning into a sniper? That's the kind of reality that Ukraine is facing right now and has been since the full-scale invasion. So reading his little one paragraph blurb, he said, when people outside care, we know that people are supporting us, and that's what's keeping us going. And that landed. I had to close my computer, cry my eyes out, and decide, okay, I need to show up in a way that people there really see that I care, not just send money, but show up. And that's when I made the decision to travel to Ukraine and paint these soldiers and gift each soldier his portrait as a thank you for protecting democracy, dignity, freedom, human rights, Europe, and global security.
So was there, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to begin to plot that journey. Did you contact somebody? Did you have any sort of assurance of safety for yourself? Or was it just
Well,
kind of,
yeah, there's never, I mean, life is not safe generally, but going into a war zone, there's never you can't have a lot of safety. You can do the best you can, but it's still a war zone. So a couple of answers to your question. I reached out to World Central Kitchen to see if I could go with them as a group. I explained my idea. They didn't get it at all. They didn't understand it at all. So I thought, okay, that won't work. I then reached out to, let's see, a friend who owned an art gallery in Florence, Italy, whom I met. And he had been a photographic journalist, like a photojournalist for UNICEF for decades. And I thought, ooh, maybe I can go with UNICEF. So I texted him and said, hey, here's what my plan is. Could I maybe go with UNICEF? And he said, no, that really wouldn't be an option. However, I just had an intern from Ukraine, and I'll introduce the two of you. Maybe the two of you could work something out. So I wrote an email to this intern, former intern, and I described just all like my journey, the brigade that had been featured in that article. I also met a gallerist, the director from Green Sofa Gallery, who was in Lviv. I ran into her by chance at the Biennale in Venice. And so I mentioned that. I mentioned all these key points, and he knew everyone. He knew the brigade. He knew the person who made up the website for that brigade. He knew the director at Green Sofa Gallery. He knew the artist being featured at the Biennale, who had traded his paintbrush for a rifle. His mother was good friends with him. And he said, let me schedule a Zoom with my brother and sister because we have a family home in Lviv and maybe you could stay with them. So we did a Zoom. Within 10 minutes, they said, absolutely, you can stay with us. And that's how it happened.
Wow.
I've got chills.
That is
This
remarkable.
was meant to be.
Absolutely. Well, as I said a moment ago, we met at the Superhuman Center right outside of Lviv, and I had the privilege of watching you work. And, we rode up that elevator together and we got out on the third, fourth floor. I can't remember exactly which floor it was. And we went into the room and a soldier was already sitting there waiting for you. And then you got your materials out and you began the painting and you started to interact with him. And it was just really, Sasha, it was an honor to be there. And for me, it was a sacred moment to see you at work and the relationship between you, the artist, and the soldier, and what was being created in the midst of that moment. So I know you've been painting these soldiers for quite a while now. Is there any story besides the original one that you've mentioned already? Is there any story of a soldier that you paint that has stood out that you could share with us?
There are many.
Oh, I can imagine.
I will share one in particular. Well, I'd like to share a few.
Please
One
do.
gentleman, he was in a wheelchair. He had a head injury, so he was completely paralyzed on one side, and he had a speech impediment. And when I asked the staff, how he was doing, what his prognosis was, they said, well, it's not great, but we're hopeful. He's doing therapy every day. He's working. And he would ambulate toward me and ask to be painted. And he would use just his one good leg to ambulate. And his speech impediment was so strong that the staff could barely understand him. And my interpreter said, I really can't understand anything he's saying. But his body language said everything. He would rest his head on my tummy. He would thank me. I understood enough language to understand that he was thanking me. And I painted him. And he was always smiling, smiling, smiling. He was from Odessa, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
told that people from Odessa have a particularly strong sense of humor. They're very playful.
Yeah.
So his spirit was doing well. He as a soul was doing well, even though his body was quite broken. And after I painted him, I decided, he's smiling, smiling, but I know there's deeper things going on here because he's clearly sustained serious injury. And so I was photographing him and I waited until he was kind of relaxing. And then I caught a particular image of him on my cell phone. And when I got home, I did a painting of it. And I'd like to share it with you right
Oh,
now.
I'd love to
Yes,
see
please.
it.
It's one that I've kept. He has his portrait, but this is one that I've kept.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
That is
That is
stunning.
stunning.
And you can see his injuries.
Yeah,
Right.
But there was such courage, but also trepidation.
sure.
These guys have experienced so much.
Mm. It takes
And
me right
it
back
shows
there.
in the body.
Just takes me right back there with you. So,
Mm,
wow.
mm.
So
Well,
I could
the
listen to
the
these
end.
stories all day long. I want to hear a couple more.
Yeah, and
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a bit more about this particular
yeah.
story. So we said goodbye, and I put a little sticker, a little gold sticker on his wheelchair. And 6 months later, I was on Instagram, and suddenly his image popped up in my feed, and he was walking down a hallway. He was
Oh,
walking,
Wow.
oh
and they
my
didn't think he would
goodness.
ever walk again.
Right.
So there's a lot of good work happening in Ukraine. We see a lot of
Oh
the
my gosh.
bombings, we
Yeah.
see a lot of the devastation. It's really important to understand that when we support a country like that and a people like that, we're supporting incredible rehabilitation work, feeding people, housing people, helping them retrain for jobs. It's so important for us to remember that because otherwise, Russia's one of Russia's biggest weapons is that of despair,
Mhm.
turning people who are, not the aggressors, turning us into people just riddled with so much despair that we become paralyzed. And we can't let that happen.
And Sasha, I want to reemphasize what you just said by using your own words, because we were doing some research for today's interview and you had a blog post dated September 12th. And on that blog post on your site, you wrote these words: I'm reciting my new mantra. This isn't about me. I'm simply a small messenger of a larger story that serves a higher purpose. And
Agreed.
when I watched you in that room with that soldier that day, it just emanated that you are part of a higher purpose. What can you tell our listeners about that higher purpose in Ukraine?
So, on a fundamental level, from a psychological standpoint, we're either pro-social or we're anti-social. Antisocial is Russia's full-scale invasion, the tortures, the murders, all the horror. Pro-social is when we step up and we make a donation. We call a congressman. We show up to support a worthy cause. It's how we help each other as human beings. And at the end of the day, if we're all pro-social, we will flourish as a people, as a society. We will absolutely, master the stars in a way as long as we're allowing people who are antisocial to drag us down, the cost is too great, is just too great. And unfortunately, there's no cure for psychopathy, but we can hold the line being loving, pro-social human beings. That's my higher purpose.
And as you paint these soldiers, you're looking them in the face, you're looking in their eye, you're talking to them, you're hearing their heart. So, I've tried to convey since my brief time over there, you've been over there certainly a lot more than I have. What is the one thing you would like the world to know about Ukraine and its people?
If you ever have the privilege of meeting a Ukrainian, particularly over there in Ukraine, because there are some refugees here, I would say you will meet the strongest, most resilient, open-hearted, loving, caring people you would ever have the privilege of meeting in your life. They deserve our support more than any other culture I've ever encountered, and I've traveled half the world.
Wow. I love that.
So what's next for you? Is there another place you'd like to go, another issue you want to draw attention to through your art, another people group that you want to interact and support?
No, I'm all in with Ukraine right now. If that changes, I'll let you know.
That's still your
But
passion.
I can say I had my work juried into an international exhibition in Florence, and the assignment, shall we say, was to take a look at the baptistry doors across from the Duomo in Florence. There's a beautiful set of doors that were crafted in bronze by Ghiberti, the Renaissance artist Ghiberti. They all depict Old Testament images, and I chose the one of Cain and Abel as my inspiration. And of course, in that story, you know, we have two brothers, one betrays the other. And I thought of Russia telling Ukraine constantly, oh, you're brothers, you're our brothers, you're our brothers. So I've taken inspiration from that panel, but I have flipped the script. And I'm in the process of painting a large format canvas of what I envision Ukraine's post-war Renaissance to look like.
Wow.
And that will be on exhibition November 2nd in Florence. And we just found out the location. It will be in Palazzo Vecchio, right next to the Uffizi Gallery in the heart of Florence.
I'm thinking, road
I mean,
trip.
surely we need to go. Yes, road trip.
Absolutely.
We'll send you an invite. Absolutely.
That would be terrific.
So I want to ask one more. I know Mitch is getting ready to wrap it up, but before we do, I want to ask, do you still keep in contact with any of the soldiers or
that's a
their
good question.
families that you paint?
Oh my gosh, yes. Virtually all of them. I'm going back again this September, and I've roped my partner into going as well. He's a Stanford adjunct professor, and he'll be speaking at the European Youth Conference in Lviv. So Lviv was
Oh.
chosen this year as the place to hold the conference for youth of all of Europe, and he'll be speaking probably for about an hour, advising young people what career path might look good to them, considering AI is really going to impact
Right.
a lot of careers and a
Sure.
lot of jobs. So yeah, I'm just bringing on board more support.
Wow.
Well,
I know Mitch is
I'm
trying to
hoping
get
to
me
get
to
my
go.
partner to go with me too there, Sasha.
Yeah.
Keep working on it.
I will. So I know our audience after this conversation is wanting to know how they can find out more about your work and your mission in Ukraine. So how can our audience find out more about you, your work, and the incredible work you're doing in Ukraine?
So I've created a website dedicated to this. It's sashasamuels.org. So SASHASAMUELS.org. And I've basically uploaded my journal notes from my first trip to Ukraine. I've not updated from this more recent trip because I have a lot of things going on.
Right.
Also, the American Coalition for Ukraine is a wonderful statewide organization. I wound up going there to DC with them in April. There were 600 strong of us. That's where I met Michael Moore, who wrote Faith Under Siege. So if you Google American Coalition for Ukraine, we can always use help. There is a bill in, let's see, in Congress, it's HR 2548 that is pushing for strong sanctions against Russia. So absolutely, what I learned in DC was call your senators, call your congressmen, all your representatives, and push for protection for Ukraine. They do pay attention. They said, you may not feel like leaving a voicemail counts. It definitely counts. They told us that over and over and over again. An email counts, a voicemail or talking to a staff member counts. And if you write a letter, that counts even more. Some people are calling every week or every day, and all those get tallied up. So I want everybody here to feel empowered. Also, it's available on YouTube. There's an incredible, powerful documentary called Faith Under Siege, by Michael Moore, where he documents the crimes against particularly our evangelical Christian brothers and sisters in the occupied zones who are being persecuted, tortured, disappeared, murdered in front of their own families at times. 40% of the religious persecution happening in the occupied zones is happening to evangelicals. So if you're an evangelical listening to this, definitely create a screening of this movie in your congregation. Send a letter to your congressional leaders, signed by, all your congregation, pushing for protections for Ukraine. So those are things you can do easily at home.
Thank
You don't have to go to Ukraine to do this.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, Sasha Samuels, it has been a joy to reconnect with you. We are so inspired by your story and by your work, and you are welcome back here anytime. And, maybe we'll see you in Florence. Who knows?
Sounds lovely.
That'd be great.
Thanks so much for having me.
But Sasha, before we
pleasure.
let you go, we've got one last question for you, and Missy has the honor of asking it. So, Missy, take it away.
So, Sasha, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
My more to tell is we're each little butterfly and we flap our wings and we can create firestorms. I wanted to help out a little bit. When I painted the soldiers, I wound up on national television twice the first time I went to Lviv. We've estimated 8 million people in Ukraine saw me painting. I wound up in DC. I met the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, Alexandra Matvichuk, who, when I told her I was going back to her country the next month, she said, well, let's have coffee. So I've had coffee with a Nobel laureate. I met my local senators here in California. I'm definitely moving the needle. So I would say lean into your passion with real courage, because you have so much more power than you realize. It's astonishing how much power you have. Reclaim your agency and lean into it.
Wow. Well, she's just an inspiration.
I was going to say, that's incredible. What an amazing and powerful story of how one person, and like you said, following your passion can make a difference.
Absolutely. Well, Sasha, thank you again for joining us on Good Faith Weekly. You are welcome back anytime, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and you keep doing your good work.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us again this week. And Missy and I will be back next week. And until then, keep living good faith.
You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.